figured it out from that capacity. So let's try this again. Technology is not a friend all the time, but here we go. One more time, we're going to try this. So we're getting started here with our Cupola conversation for today, August 12th, 2020. I'm Chris Dansbury. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, definitely not the IT guy. I can promise you that. I'll be serving as the moderator for today's Cupola conversation. Welcome to the fall semester. We're not used to saying that on August 12th. For sure. It's a little bit weird, but then again, with a global pandemic and systemic racism and protests and hurricanes and earthquakes, pretty much a quiet election cycle I'm sure we'll have coming up. Pretty much 2020 has been a unique of its own. One thing about our college students of today, they are engaged, they're invested, they're connected to social justice, politics, and world events. They really can't help it. They've got their devices with them pretty much all the time, and it shows up on their phones, and they're engaged. They want to be involved. However, one of the places they haven't always been able to have conversations or feel like they can sometimes is talking about current events inside the classroom. So today's conversation is called Civil Discourse in the Classroom, and we're going to kick off our fall theme for the Decision 2020 is the theme for the fall semester, well in advance of the election cycle. But continuing this conversation, we are asking our panelists today to talk about civil discourse in the classroom, and we're going to hear from them. We've heard from students and faculty, in fact, that they want to have these conversations and this important dialogue, but sometimes the how to have those conversations can be a little bit of a stumbling block. Part of our panel today, I think you're really going to enjoy it and hear what they have to say. I will let them introduce themselves in just a few minutes, and then we'll start with the questions. As I mentioned kind of at the beginning, but I'm not sure you heard me, up in the top there is a Q&A box that has a little question mark up top. That will be where we'll take your questions. So as you're watching, we want you to participate in the program as much as you can. Send in questions that you might have for our panelists, and we will pose them to the panelists as we get them and we go forward. Keep in mind, we won't get to everybody's questions, and our panelists cannot see your questions. We've got your audio and your video off just so that we can eliminate some of the noise distractions. So the chat will come into the folks here in the room. They will feed questions my way, and we will get them to the panelists in addition to the questions that we've already got prepared. Again, we will have some tech issues, may have somebody forget to turn mute on or off. We may have a computer that may decide not to work at all, and we'll make that work as we go through. So it's not ideal, but we'll get there. So very honored to be a part of this conversation, and let's just get started. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists if they would. Our first question I'm going to pose to them. Before they do that, I'm going to have them tell you who they are. Introduce themselves and their role either at the university or in the community. So we're going to start with Provost Grant Hayes. Our first question for each of the panelists is going to be, what are some of the challenges or the barriers that we face that might prevent civil discourse from taking place in the classroom? Provost Hayes.
Thank you. First, I'd just like to say that our classrooms strive to be a safe environment for students to exchange ideas, to share opinions, and to get feedback, on those ideas and opinions without fear and intimidation. And I think in order for civil discourse to happen, I think as faculty, we must assess the classroom's climate. I think certain students in the class may not be ready for a particular topic, and allowing things to escalate to a place of a matter getting overheated really undermines learning in the classroom. Each student, in my opinion, has his or her own developmental readiness level for certain topics. And I think that topics that are risky, even the most mature students may have difficult times dealing with those subject matters. So I'm not saying that these topics should not be discussed, but I think as faculty, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that the environment is safe and supportive. I think that we should set the rules, and I think we need to work with students in order to build those skills so that we can engage in a healthy, productive conversation around the topics.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. I appreciate that greatly. Caleb, you're next up. I want to thank you. As a student, it's not easy to have a conversation to be on this side where you're a student talking with faculty and folks to kind of share your opinion. So I appreciate the unique perspective that you're in here, and thank you for participating. So if you would please introduce yourself and kind of tell us maybe your kind of sense of that first question about maybe the barriers.
Thank you. Like you said, my name is Caleb Gass. I'm a communication public relations student, a senior here at East Carolina University. And I think that Provost Hayes really hit on what needs to happen in our classrooms. From my perspective, professors really need to change the way they handle their classroom. There's such a strong insistence that their way, their thoughts, their mindset is the only correct answer. Oftentimes, students with differing viewpoints are shut down for having them, or they have fear of alienation, that the professor will lock in and really devastate their grades for having such an opinion. And oftentimes it creates an environment that does not promote that free exchange of ideas, which should be so evident within our university system.
Thank you very much, Caleb. Ebony?
Hi, yes, I'm Ebony Baugh. I'm Associate Professor in the Department of Human Development and Family Science and work with the Office for Faculty Excellence as the Faculty in Residence for Mentoring and Inclusion. And so I would say one of the major challenges with regard to civil discourse in the classroom can befall a lot of our faculty members based on their own social location and whether or not they feel like they have the privilege enough to lean into these conversations and go there with students. I have heard a lot from, our adjunct faculty, our non-tenured folks, fixed-term faculty members that want to have these conversations, but may fear retribution from students or negative student evaluations. And so I think that can be a barrier. One of the things that I do tell those folk is to lean in on the privilege of others, grab your mentor or that senior faculty member in your department and have them help you co-facilitate these discussions. So, because I agree with both Caleb and Grant that it's very, very important that we do usher students into these types of conversations and value all voices in the classroom, but to make sure that they are civil and respectful.
Thank you very much, Ebony, for that. Leslie, coming up to you next, but I want to make sure folks know too that have maybe not watched a Cupola Conversation before. In a lot of cases, we try to have representation from the student body, the faculty, the staff, but sometimes we'll reach out to community members that have a content-related expert that would fit into this field, and we're very happy to have Leslie Garvin joining us. I'll let her do her own introduction. Don't want to steal her thunder for that, but I'll also let her add in a little bit to that first conversation too. Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Garvin, and I'm the Executive Director of North Carolina Campus Compact. And I want to thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. And I'm really just going to echo, I think, what's been said. Let me step back and say, I think one of the challenges is that very few of us have training in the skills, dispositions, and habits of citizenship. We know that there have been great cuts to civic education. We know that there is a framing in our world that we don't talk about difficult things, right? Religion and politics, things like that. And so I think one of the challenges in the classroom and one of the commitments that has to be made is that faculty need to be committed to gaining those skills themselves and practicing them. And there are lots of different tools, methods, online trainings, modules, all sorts of ways for faculty to feel comfortable having difficult conversations. There's lots of guidebooks and tools so that they can have that. But then the second thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, is I think it also needs to be, and this was sort of said before, you have to create the atmosphere and create the structure, right? So whether that's that there are community agreements, that there's an understanding of how we interact and relate to one another in the classroom, and that has to happen from day one so that you've created the relationship building and the trust to kind of have these kind of conversations.
Thank you all. I appreciate those opening comments. Very important start to this. I want to follow up kind of with a little bit with Provost Hayes and then with Dr. Ball as well. if you're a political scientist, it's probably easy to have a conversation in the class about the elections. If you're a sociology talking about societal issues, it may be coming a little bit more natural. Maybe what advice might you offer faculty when it's not, if they want to talk about race or the elections or whatever the current event might be, but it's not in their wheelhouse? What advice might you offer to them?
I think one thing we have to realize is that civil discourse doesn't happen on its own. I think the ability to engage in civil discourse requires practice. And we can't expect students or faculty to get it right the first time. And we can't, expect them to engage in topics that are highly controversial right off the bat. In my opinion, I think that maybe someone who's beginning to talk about these kinds of things, to begin with activities that don't feel personally threatening to students. And one way to do that, I think, is by having students watch other people engage in contentious topics in a peaceful fashion. I think this is an effective way of modeling the kind of discourse that we are trying to promote.
Dr. Ball?
Sure, I agree with everything Provost Hayes said, and I want to piggyback on what Leslie spoke of earlier and the fact of establishing ground rules from the beginning. And I think it's important for faculty members to create those ground rules with their students. So to have the students give input, because they're more likely, if they take part in the process of establishing what is and what isn't acceptable, they're more likely to adhere to them. And they're also more likely to hold each other accountable. Our students at ECU are so passionate and so committed, and in the classroom, they just dig in. And so if they are involved in a part of the process, that usually helps, especially for people who are new to this area. But I would also encourage people who are thinking about having these conversations in their classes to prepare for the moment when the topic goes off course and heads into maybe a personal or passionate area, and for them to guide it back to the course material. I often ask my students, I'm happy that you're passionate about it. Okay, let's spend some time talking about this, but pull out your laptops, pull out your phones, pull up some scholarly material or some research or theory to back it up, so that it takes the personal note out of it, and it brings it back to the class and to the focus of why we're having the conversation in the first place.
Dr. Ball, I want to stick with you real quick with a follow-up to that. In a lot of the conversations of things that might resonate back to a classroom, emotion is usually highly charged in those topics, whatever it's going to be. Again, could be politics, could be a hurricane, could be racism, whatever it is that is going on. Emotion seems to be rolling up. It gets higher and higher, and I think the less it gets addressed, it just continues to build up, especially with our students. It's a natural concern, isn't it, for a faculty member to be a little weary about giving up some control in the classroom for a conversation that maybe they don't feel comfortable with to begin with?
Of course, because you feel like that the wheels have fallen off, right? And that you've kind of lost all hope. But I do some diversity education training around the state, and I talk with people about calling people in instead of calling them out. That when we're emotionally charged, we have a tendency to, go for the jugular or get to that point. But if we ask questions for clarification, because I think Caleb mentioned this before, that a lot of students may feel like their faculty members only want them to have their particular opinion. But if faculty and students would take the time to say, okay, well, I don't agree with you, but tell me more about that. Give me some more information. That usually helps to decrease the emotionality, because then people have to think, well, why am I so passionate? I have to think about this. And so then you can kind of maybe decrease the level of emotions in the classroom.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's kind of a nice segue, because I want to come to Caleb here for this, because you said you're a senior, so you've been in a few classes in your time here at ECU. I would imagine you've kind of seen this play out in a variety of different ways. Maybe from your experiences, how have you seen current events handled or addressed maybe in some of the classes that you've had?
Sure, and I'd like to touch back on something that Dr. Ball alluded to. Oftentimes, some stuff has no relation to the course, and I think it's important to have discussions when they do arise, but so often professors are speaking to matters that are not germane to the course content. Speaking politics in an English class, a mathematics professor, a basic mathematics course, going in depth on his theories regarding global warming. And I think it's so important that you keep focus on your course content. We don't come here to listen and to find these ideas, these wild theories within courses that have no relation to the content of the course. And an example I'd like to share, that there was this photography course, which, I was thinking maybe we were going to learn how to take pictures in this class. And one day, this professor is sharing a slideshow. Before she gets to it, she says, hey, this will broaden your horizons. You will, have a better perspective on the world. She proceeds to share pornography for the remainder of the course. This is a freshman course. I don't know that many parents or students are coming into college expecting to be shared pornography in the classroom on day one or, second semester. I'm not sure it's appropriate or germane to the course.
So, difficult conversations are part of, I think, the college experience. I think part of where we want dialogue to occur. Leslie, this is kind of something that has become something that is your background. It is your expertise. Having trainings that you've done on deliberate dialogue. I know that we've had speakers that have come to campus, one in mine a couple of years ago, that talked about when you're listening to somebody who's giving a differing opinion, don't spend that time thinking about what you're getting ready to say. Fully listen intently to that conversation and hear what they have to say. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to disagree. Talk a little bit about that when you do these trainings about deliberate dialogue and uncomfortable conversation. What are you looking for when you do those trainings?
Yeah, so I would say I'm back to the need for community commitments and ground rules, right? So the first thing is that you've always got to have that in place so that if there is something that starts to veer in the wrong direction, you can, similar to what Dr. Ball said, you've made a commitment that as a group that you're gonna lean in and try to listen. So one of those guys would be listening intently. I will say, however, that it's really key that faculty have, I guess, a cheat sheet with them at all times in terms of when is it time to intervene, right? So I think it's key that we develop these habits and practices, and we've created this structure and the parameters for students to hold each other accountable in these kind of conversations. But there really are times when we have to step in and intervene, right? If someone is dehumanizing someone, if someone is devaluing someone, then we have to have the skills to be able to challenge the idea and not the person, to redirect folks back to the topic at hand. And so I think it's really, I want to say that faculty don't have to do this on their own. I think sometimes there's the fear of doing this because it's, I'm going to let this run wild and who knows where it's going to go. The reality is there are a million tools out there, right? There are living room conversations. There's Braver Angels. There's deliberative dialogue with issue guides. There's everyday democracy. I could go through a list of 100 tools that could actually and help you start slow. Right, we could have a conversation about something much less, difficult than where we could get. But once we've created the dispositions and habits tied to the course, as Caleb said, then we can have the ability and the efficacy to really dig into the more difficult conversations. But then also, again, the faculty member always has to have the tools and the confidence that if it does go off the rails, that they have the skills and the language to bring it back. And so that's my thinking about the difficult conversations. But we can't be scared of them.
Yeah, and it's easy to be. And as a matter of fact, that actually, you almost saw where I was going with this. So I'm going to actually kind of segue along those lines to Provost Hayes. You have been a dean. You are representative of the faculty. As the provost, you are the vice chancellor in charge of academic affairs. So you have a unique perspective. With all these hot button topics that come up, And now in this pandemic environment where you've got a virtual environment, and even if you're face to face, you have to have back. There's an awful lot that are on faculty right now. It's a difficult time to be a faculty member. Talk a little bit about how do you help them? How do you encourage them in these conversations to, it's hard to be all for everybody.
Right. You know, I think first I just wanted to say that faculty, staff, and administrators are committed to providing opportunity and space for students and employees to have discussions, you know, like this. What are some things that we are doing to support faculty? I think that one thing Ebony talked about this as far as in her role, that we've created a faculty in residence position housed in the Office of Faculty Excellence to help lead professional development opportunities and to organize these matters for faculty. I know that some faculty are engaging in examining curriculum to address concerns on specific topics. To conversations like this, I think is also supportive in the work to provide dialogue with a clear focus on important topics. You know, one thing is that certain topics are more likely to arouse emotion in students and others, like race and gender and class. And you know, this is since they deal with personal identity, and we tend to personalize these issues. But we recognize the challenge. We will meet these challenges head on, and I think we will be a strong university by doing so.
Thank you, sir. A reminder for those that are watching the live edition. We're happy to have more than 70 of you participating right now. Again, click that question mark at the top right as you get that Q&A feature, and you can send in a question just as one of our folks that are watching have done. So I want to ask this question first to Ebony and then to Leslie after that for a comment. So the question that came in is, how should a professor deal with discourse, but also balancing that with the well-being of minority students, students of color, LGBT, or differing abilities? How does that balance occur? So Ebony, I'll go to you first on that one.
Sure, I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, establishing that environment of safety. So one of the things I didn't mention in talking about setting the ground rules is that then it is incumbent upon the faculty member to then adhere to them. And so if a student is being attacked because of their social location or because of their minority status, then the professor or the faculty member is definitely going to need to intervene, but also that those should be a part of the understandings. That I talk with my students about when we debate about, you know, what is covered under free speech and is hate speech covered under free speech, and I always tell them free speech does not mean free reign. Like, you can say, of course, whatever you want to say, but there are going to be consequences if you are divisive, if you are assaulting, or if you are verbally attacking another student.
Leslie?
Yeah, so I would say that if we've created an atmosphere where, so one of my ground rules is we seek to take care of each other in this space because we're trying to learn, then I think when these moments arise, certainly you can expect or hope that the group will actually have some accountability there. In terms of questioning what was stated or how it was stated. And so the goal, of course, is that the students themselves are able to hold each other accountable. But I would also say that there are great opportunities to help us think about intention versus impact, ways of restating things. And so I think for me, I try to assume best intentions, that this person did not intend to say something that was devaluing or dehumanizing or something along those lines. And yet we can't let the moment pass without addressing it. And so almost as Dr. Ball said, the goal is to call people in. I will also say, however, that there are times when you need to recognize the need for the pause. Sometimes you need to stop the conversation, take a break, do whatever needs to happen if you need to take care of someone or help someone, if their emotional weight and the burden on them just seems too heavy. So I think you just have to really be attuned to what is happening in the space. And then when you've been able to lower the emotion or address the emotion or the pain, then you can come back together. What I tend to not do is allow people to walk out of the space without us trying to reconcile it with each other. Some people have different views on that. But again, I think if you've created the expectation that this is a community of care and learning, then you can hope that, first of all, that'll minimize those sorts of comments, but it will also help us to be respectful and not personal, to try to address what was said and not attack the person who said something that we think was misguided.
Thank you for that. I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up, Leslie, that we got another question coming in that's going to come back your way. So I'm going to pose a question to Caleb here in just a second, but then I'm going to come back to you because there's some questions from folks that are wanting to know more about the resources you touched on. So I'll give you a second. Maybe you can queue up some and be ready for that, but that'll be coming here in just a second. Caleb, I want to come to you for a question. And I know during your time, you've had the opportunity to study abroad, go different places. Talk about how you've seen productive civil discourse maybe take place, and that works really well in some of the places that you've been.
Sure. I had the opportunity last spring to study abroad in China in a business university, Zhengxi University of Business, Finance and Economics. And, you know, civil discourse is discouraged in the classroom and really all across that country. You know, we are blessed here to live in a country where we are allowed, we have the right to free speech and free expression. And I encourage everybody to take a look at our Constitution every day, because I can't tell you how many Chinese students came to me in private and, you know, shared things with me that they would not otherwise share in a classroom setting, but in private. And, you know, I had a lot of conversations outside the classroom because of that. And I think I learned a lot more from my classmates from China and from all across the globe about their experiences and their views on the world than I did in the classroom. Because that conversation wasn't encouraged. And I think that's a place where professors can really take a look at their students and just see how diverse we are here at East Carolina University, how rich in diversity we are from backgrounds, from groups, from religious faiths. I mean, it's just beautiful to see that if professors can allow the opportunity for students, you know, not to be moderated, but allow their speech and allow them to share their unique view within that classroom as it pertains to the course.
Thank you, Caleb. I appreciate that. Dr. Hayes, that lends to a difficult part of an instructor or faculty member, as Caleb said, you know, to embrace maybe some of those opportunities. But this is a question that was posed in. I pulled a little change up. I said I was coming to Leslie, but I'm coming to you with this one. So some concern sometimes is, I'll just read the question as is, and then maybe we can go that route. Is it better to encourage participation or offer alternative assignments for conversations about difficult topics? Faculty members sometimes are concerned that they get negative teaching evaluations because they're forcing a discussion to occur. It's a delicate balance, but that question right there, I don't know if you have any kind of thought to that as far as other ways to also have that participation too. Oh, you're on mute, sir. There you go. Thanks.
Okay. No, I was going to say that, you know, to go back to what I said earlier, it's so important to really take the temperature of the class so that you are able to gauge how fast and quickly you can move as far as dealing with certain conversations. I think one way that maybe a good start would be, in order to get to that point, is to doing it in a written format. Maybe a way to do it as far as giving them a statement or a topic, having them say if they agree or disagree or strongly agree or whatever, and then have them take a position and then defend that position in a written format, and then moving on from that to maybe doing something public. And then really assessing how the students are moving or progressing, and before you maybe throw out a very controversial topic to debate or to discuss.
Thank you, sir. Leslie, want to come to you next. Go back to that resources question. So you went through some of the resources, kind of quickly rolling through them. If you would, go through some of those again, maybe also giving some folks opportunities to find out where they can access or where they should go look for and find some of this, because I think that was embraced by those folks by the folks that are watching. Again, we got more than 70 on the live, and others can watch later. What are some resources that are out there for folks that want to participate and get involved?
Okay, there's lots of them, but I'll start with recommending the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation. So that's ncdd.org. And they have something that they call the Streams of Engagement Framework. And so they have divided all of these dialogue, discourse, deliberative practices in areas. And so as you're thinking about designing the class or integrating these tools into your curriculum, you can decide, and they have it as, these are models where you can explore ideas. These are models for conflict transformation, where you're trying to teach people how to deal with conflict. The other area is decision making, and then the other is collaborative action. I like that as a tool because it just sort of divides them up. I'll tell you, I take a different approach. And so mine is, are we just trying to create the practices of understanding and listening? And so in that framework, for me, there are things like living room conversations. I think that's livingroomconversations.org, Democrates, and Socrates Cafe. So this is teaching like the Aristotelian practice of asking questions, inquiry, listening. Then you have the next level when I think about the levels of how this develops, and that's the ones that are about creating understanding across difference. Really someone who has a different identity, a different background. And so that's things like intergroup dialogue, everyday democracy, sustained dialogue, and then racial healing circles, which comes out of Duke University's Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation Center, study circles, and then the final level for me, which is what I do a lot of work with, is deliberative democracy practices. This is where we're trying to teach students not just to talk about it, but to take action on issues, but doing it in a way that we are literally weighing all of the downsides, the benefits, really wrestling with public decision making, and then taking action on it. So, and then the final level for people that are really brave, and what we tend to avoid in higher education, is partisan dialogue. And that's literally calling out what we know is one of the things that exists most openly in the terms of polarization. And that is, so the organization I'm a moderator for, or training to be a moderator for, is Braver Angels. And so they have red and blue workshops where you have equal numbers, but I will also just put a shout out for, I just completed the Depolarizing Within workshop. If you have not done your own work of looking at how you think about the world in terms of politics and issues, and finding some skills about how in your own personal circles you can start to practice and redirect and try to create community and depolarize, this is a great tool for that.
Thank you very much for that. And I do want to put as a quick shout out here, the ECU Center for Leadership and Civic Engagement has worked with Leslie, and I believe that they've got a 2-hour training that will be coming up. They're still working on a date and some of the logistics, but keep an eye out for that Leslie will be doing a training that will be targeted towards faculty and assisting with that. So CLCE will be having some kind of communication. Vice Chancellor Hardy will probably be the one putting that out to campus. So once that date, time, and everything is set up, please be on the lookout for that. Thank you, Leslie, for even in advance offering to participate in that. Another question that came in, I think I'm looking trying to catch up to it. Provost Hayes, I'm going to ask this one to Ebony. I want to get your kind of perspective from the OFE faculty and residents perspective, but is it advised at all ever to meet with a student independently at any point to discuss conversations that may have occurred in the classroom?
So I'm assuming they're asking if they should meet with a student one-on-one. I think
Correct.
it depends on the comfortability of the faculty member. Of course, like we have student hours for a reason, because we have a lot of students that may not feel comfortable speaking up in class or even talking to us in front of other people. So I think that they do deserve our one-on-one time. But I know that there are some faculty members that may be hesitant depending on what the issue is, or maybe because of what the student maybe has to say. And that once again, I will go back to tapping into your networks and your mentors and sponsors on campus to help facilitate those. Of course, definitely your department chair or your unit head. But I do think it's a hard question to answer, because I think like I tell my students all the time, the answers to many questions is it depends, ... So there are a lot of variables there. But I definitely think faculty members do, and we do on ECU's campus, faculty members are really, really great in holding space for students when they need that little extra time.
I forgot to take myself off mute. While I've got you here queued up, I want to come right back to you with a question that we had already kind of queued up in our list. Some folks may not even know that ECU has a faculty in residence, or that OFE offers such a program, things like that. Talk a little bit about what that role is of faculty in residence and how it maybe could support faculty members expanding their skill sets.
Okay, well, one of the wonderful things about it is it's new. So I don't have like huge shoes to fill, but I'm so excited. I've been working with the Office for Faculty Excellence for a year and a half now as the faculty fellow. And one of the things that we've talked about, I've talked with the director, Sarah Williams, so shout out if she's watching, about this position is the importance of support for faculty members on campus and our graduate students that teach as well. Because the mission of the OFE is really to support teaching, research, service for faculty through professional development opportunities, consultation, and programming. And what we really want, or maybe I should say what I would like to do, is to make sure that the OFE is kind of the hub for faculty, kind of like the student center is for students. Because the OFE has, and even as a new faculty member when I came here many years ago, I had no clue of all of the resources and support mechanisms that were at the OFE. And so one of the things that I want to do in this role, and keep my fingers crossed, is to provide more awareness of all of the resources that are available at through the Office for Faculty Excellence. We've had people come in and there's kind of no question that goes unanswered, because if we cannot address it, we definitely will find someone. But just mentoring and inclusion is something that's near and dear to my heart. And I've talked with many faculty members across campus that, you know, feel like they need those additional levels of support. And sometimes they want to go outside of their departments or outside of their colleges to get that and network with other people on campus. So like I said, hopefully the OFE and our faculty quarters will be the faculty, become the cool faculty hangout center.
I wish you luck with that. I hope it turns into that, and good luck. We're starting to wind down on some of our questions. If you do have questions during the live edition here, we are taking them. Continue to submit them before we wrap up here, and we'll continue to ask the panel. Provost Hayes, I want to come your way. This is one that's kind of going off a little bit of the script of the conversation, but I think it's important. But I've heard you talk about this in the last week or so. The fall is going to be unique and different in 1,000 different ways, from the virtual environment, from students, from masks, from everything else that way. I wanted to give you a little bit of a platform here real quick, just to speak directly to the faculty. Any words of encouragement or words of guidance that you want to offer up to them as they, you know, we're day 3, but as we go into the bulk of this 2 blocks fall semester.
Sure. First, I would just like to say how thankful I am we have such an excellent faculty here at ECU. These individuals have worked extremely hard over the last few months as far as with curriculum, with advising, with mentoring, with really having very little time to, meet some of the challenges that we've had to meet over the last few months. Have things been seamless? No, but I tell you, the dedication and the hard work has really gone into that. And this really is a reflection of the amazing people that we have here at the university. I know that we are still dealing with some challenges, and I think if we really stay together, communication, of course, is going to be key, that we're going to be able to really support each other and really come out of this really in a good place.
Thank you, sir. As a two-time alum of this university and somebody, this is my 14th year here at ECU, I think I've not seen a place rally around difficult times better than any other campus. I think it's just a unique environment that people do what they have to do and need to do, and it's not even just let's survive it, it's really let's power through it and make it better, and provide. We've got 4,500, 4,200 new first-year freshmen that are coming in, and they don't know what norm is. They're just trying to learn as they go. And I think having us, our faculty and our staff and administration, embrace them and still try and give them the best experience possible. I've just seen, like you said, I've seen so many people step up to this challenge, and it makes me very proud of my university that I'm employed by, but also the university that I earned my degree from. So thank you for those comments. I do want to start to kind of wrap up. So I have a final question that I'm going to ask everybody. I'm going to start with you, Caleb.
Mr. Stansbury, I would love to jump in for a moment.
Sure.
I understand that possibly the viewership is predominantly professors, but I would love to spend some time speaking. Obviously I'm the only student here, and I think that a lot of my experiences are things that members of the faculty can learn from. Perhaps there are things that they're inadvertently doing in the classroom, or maybe these are just off experiences. I don't speak for all the students, but my experiences I've had the past 3 years are quite unique, I would say, and I think that so often we're worried about losing control of the class on a professor's end of things, and ultimately I think it's not about having control at all. I think it's about promoting conversations. And based on my experiences, professors have pushed their own personal views and sometimes partisan politics into that. And I'd like to share one example. At one point, I was in a sports media survey class, and this course was based in the premise that sports are political, politicized, and have always been in the forefront of politics. And myself and a few other students disagreed with that basic premise, and we shared that disbelief. And we were always confronted by this professor saying, I understand you have that belief, but that's not the culture of the course. We are focusing that this course is on politics, and I just disagree. I do not think that sports are meant to be political in any way. I think that they're a great way to get away from politics. And ultimately, this professor shut differing viewpoints down, whether that was in our online discussion forum, whether that was in the class being vocalized, or that was within our coursework, sometimes receiving half or zero credit for such work. And I think that this is so important, that we understand that this does happen in the classroom at East Carolina University. And I'm not trying to indict, particular professors. I don't believe that all professors do that, but it has been my experience. And I think that many professors don't intend to do that. It just so happens to occur.
Thank you for that. Ebony, I want to give you a chance maybe to kind of bounce back from a faculty perspective in that from what Caleb kind of is alluding to is that sometimes it's not necessarily some folks are not sure where to start, but then there's other folks that feel perfectly comfortable having maybe difficult conversations, and they come off as one side of a perspective or another, and it's not the dialogue, it's more of it's being spoken at rather than a conversation. I didn't know if you had any kind of follow-up thoughts back to that.
Well, I think the diversity of experience for faculty members are going to be just as robust as the diversity of experience of our students. And so, you know, it's really hard for people to separate their personal and professional lives. And depending on the course content, it may be more applicable for a professor to share their personal opinions and perceptions. I can only speak to what happens in my class and what goes on. But I do think that if we're talking about having civil discourse, then it should go both ways. That, you know, that students should be respectful of their faculty members and faculty members should be respectful of those students.
Thank you for that. I think that's the part that we're kind of going towards here, towards the finish line. I want to give a kind of that last thought of engaging in dialogue. Are there any kind of closing thoughts? I think maybe that's one reason too why some faculty even are a little hesitant to go down a road of having civil discourse, because maybe some don't want to give just their opinion and don't want to open it up, and there is a lot to that. But I want to give kind of everybody about a 30-second opportunity to kind of wrap up with closing thoughts, with advice, or any kind of final thoughts in this case. So I want to start with Provost Hayes. I started it off with you. I want to give you that same opportunity as we wrap up.
Sure, thank you. I think one thing that we haven't talked about, we talked about creating that safe space, but I think we also need to have trust, you know, that our students need to trust us and we need to trust our students in order for, I think, civil discourse to effectively occur and for people to really open up and share their those opinions. I think we also must remember the basic rule of civil discourse, and that is to be respectful and not make it personal. You know, stick to the issues. Each person, I think, in a civil discourse is entitled to his or her own opinion, and is also entitled to be treated with respect and with dignity.
Thank you, sir. Caleb, next.
Thanks again for allowing me the opportunity to participate in this forum. I greatly appreciate your willingness to listen to my observations based on my experience here as a student. You know, if we truly want to have a balanced and open conversation on this campus about critical issues that are on the minds of most students right now, it must start with our professors proactively creating that atmosphere in the classroom to promote this reality. If the current mindsets of professors prevail, very little positive will happen in the coming months. As students come back with lots of big concerns about coronavirus, race relations, a looming financial crisis, and the big election in the balance, it is my opinion that many professors will only add fuel to the fire with their classroom antics, instead of allowing for positive discourse to occur in their classroom that could actually bring us together as one ECU United Pirate Nation family.
Thank you, Caleb. Leslie?
Yeah, so I would say one of the key components, and I've alluded to this, is that we start with ourselves, that we try to practice and develop these skills as practitioners, scholars, however we think of ourselves. I would also say that for me, it's important that we are clear that civil discourse does not mean with no disagreement, right? And so I think sometimes we use the idea that civility and all of those terms that are in that same family is about politeness. And so I just want to make sure that I confirm that disagreement is part of it. And that is the types of dispositions and habits we're trying to create for our nation. And that this really has to be part of a bigger reframing for me of higher education. That higher education is not just readiness for career, it's readiness for our democracy. And so for me, civil discourse is literally just one rung in how higher ed needs to reevaluate whether or not we're giving those practices or teaching the practices of democracy. And civil discourse is one piece of it. And it's a key piece, because if we don't know how to talk across difference and try to resolve some of these big issues, they're going to continue. And I'll just say, I am grateful to all the faculty that are on this call, because that indicates that they have a desire to do more of this. I will also say, like Martin Luther King said about the fierce urgency of now, that I don't know in my lifetime it's ever been more urgent that we start to think about what kind of democracy we want to have and what kind of future we want to build together. So I'm glad to be part of the conversation, and thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Leslie. Ebony?
Yeah, I just would, for both students and faculty alike, to encourage them to go ahead and have these uncomfortable conversations or dialogues and find some type of comfort in the discomfort, because most of the situations that or topics that you will be talking about is much more painful, and it's much more of a negative experience to actually have that experience than to talk about it in the classroom. And so I would hope that people would, not to use this phrase or overuse this phrase, but lean in more and to be vulnerable. I think that's the biggest thing, coming into a situation and assuming that your professor is going to think one way, or they have certain political leanings, or to think that your students are going to think a certain way or have certain political leanings, then that can be a huge barrier to having these types of discourses. So I think if people are vulnerable, they get a little bit comfortable in this uncomfort and really kind of have an open dialogue, because these are the things that we need to be talking about and we have not been talking about enough.
I want to thank our panel, Provost Hayes, Leslie Garvin, Caleb Gass, Ebony Ball. Thank you for the last 55 minutes of a wonderful conversation. I think that is another part of that is everything with Cupola Conversations is that this is not the first and only. The conversation does have to go on. It has to go forward, and figuring out ways that we can do things better. And that's kind of through discomfort, through disagreement, through whatever the situation would be. Finding civil discourse in the middle of it, I think, makes us all a stronger campus. So for our panelists, thank you. For the 70+ folks that were with us for the entire 50 minutes, thank you for being a part of this, and stay tuned for more Cupola Conversations as we go through the fall semester. Until then, everybody stay safe.